I was really fortunate. I took a job with the National Hockey League in New York City, and I was running their nascent NHL center ice business, which was a television property that was only available on, at first, satellite television.
Right.
So you had to order a subscription package, and you got all the NHL games from around the league. And since then, since we started it 25 plus years ago, it's now grown into this, just.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Sporting Global podcast. And today I'm actually in Lisbon, but I am of course here with Ken Gelman. And Ken, how are you? How's life these days?
I'm great, Ole. Everything's good. We're coming out of this pandemic, so things are getting back to a little bit of normalcy. Still been a crazy couple of years here, as I'm sure it has been where you are as well.
Right.
But the sports industry is starting to get back to business here in North America. People are attending sporting events. The majority of the audience is vaccinated, which is great.
Right.
So that's been big. And I think as an industry, these are the things for live events, especially, that we've been waiting for. So we'll see how 2022 unfolds. But
what kind of year is it at this point? Are we even counting?
I know, right? It feels like one big blur. But yeah. I'm really optimistic that 22 is going to be our first kind of normal year we've had in a couple of years. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's really what you were saying as well about having people vaccinated, having people in the stadiums as well. Norway is practically open as normal now, so it was really nice. Norway was playing a big qualifier for the World Cup. Unfortunately, we didn't qualify at the end, but maybe next time. But it was really cool to see 25,000 people, full stadium. A lot of people, a lot of engagement, and that's what you want to see, we all remember obviously the first months, but it's been like this for 2 years now, where you're literally had nobody in the stadiums, more or less. And
except for cardboard cutouts of fans, which I think we can do without now.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember that was kind of an interesting approach to keeping your fans there, which I really get. But I guess it doesn't bring the same sound or enthusiasm to the arena. But yeah, Ken, I just wanted to I guess in a sense just hear a little bit of your journey, in the sport industry, and sort of how it all began. Because obviously you've been experienced with a lot of different kind of companies and sector as well in sports. And take us a little bit through how it all started and where you are at now.
Absolutely. Be happy to. I've been really fortunate. I've been able to be in this industry for over 25 years, and every day is an adventure. Yeah. Where it started for me was back at university. I attended Syracuse University here in the US. And back then, about 30 years ago, there were no sports programs, but I was in the communications school there. The Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse,
right?
And they really spoke about production. They spoke to us about writing. They spoke with us about management within sort of the larger media world. Right. And as we know, over the years, sports and media have really become synonymous. I mean, you really can't have one without the other. So I was really steeped in more of a media background. I was always a sports nut from when I was a kid, a big sports fan. And I thought at one point maybe I'd be a broadcaster, or I'd be, calling games on television or presenting them or something. Yeah. But when I went to school, I learned that I really enjoyed the business side of things more so than being in front of the camera. Right. Behind the camera for me was more exciting. There was more to learn. There was more to do and grow with. So I really started my career in sports on the advertising agency side. I worked for a couple of agencies in New York City that had sports clients, and that exposed me to sort of the inner workings of marketing and how they promoted their businesses. And I realized that it really was a business. You know, when I was in school, I was a fan. I loved watching sports. I loved attending live events at stadiums and arenas, but I didn't really understand, you know, what went into it, what to produce it. So I got a little taste of that. And then in 1997, I was really fortunate. I took a job with the National Hockey League in New York City, and I was running their nascent NHL center ice business, which was a television property that was only available on, at first, satellite television. Right. So you had to order a subscription package, and you got all the NHL games from around the league. And since then, since we started it 25 plus years ago, it's now grown into this, you know, just media property par excellence.
NHL network, right?
We started the NHL network when I was there. I had a big hand in creating the network on the business side. The NHL.com was really just in its infancy. So we were trying out different digital products at the time, which now, of course, is ubiquitous. It's everywhere, right? So I really, my role was to run this little business within the NHL. And I kind of say little because when I started, it was little,
right? And
now it's you know, it's hundreds of millions of dollars of a media property, basically, is what I started. So with others, So it was really exciting to see that evolution. And I was at the NHL for 7 years through 2004, and it was they were some of the best years of my career. I like to tell people that was my graduate school, was working at the NHL.
It's not a bad graduate school, you know?
No. When you can work for a professional league like that, it teaches you so much about the industry, and it connects you with so many people from all walks of life. And that was the exciting thing. And I've always been a very creative person where I don't like to just have one narrow kind of task to do. I like to get involved in different areas of the business and roll up my sleeves and learn. And the great thing about the NHL is that they allow that. You work with different departments, you work with broadcasting, you work with marketing, you work with sponsorship. My position, I was really fortunate because I got to see the NHL.com birth, basically, when the internet was so young and it was 1.0 basically. So I was involved with a lot of that, new products, a lot of media, a lot of marketing, a lot of new experiments at that point. Just one quick story is one of our broadcasters in Canada, CBC, which was the state-run network. They carried the NHL games for a number of years, and we started creating these products where their marquee program, Hockey Night in Canada, which was it's an institution on Saturday nights.
Right.
Instead of just broadcasting the game, we were able to give them different camera angles, different channels to choose from. They wanted to follow one star player the whole time. They could watch that. We had a statistics channel. So this was, 20 years ago, before there was a lot of this going on. This sort of the second screen idea. We actually had this like second screen idea before social media came along, and Twitter and Facebook. So it was neat being a part of that. It was really rare. So that was the beginning of my sports journey. And I'll go quickly now. Since then, I worked with WWE for a couple of years. So another big property. And then I went out on my own for about 10 years with my own agents. So what I did was I had this entrepreneurial spirit, knowing the background that I had with working at the league, also working within advertising. I understood sort of the needs of the sports industry and the properties, and those were my clients. So I worked with the NFL on my own business. They were my client, the NFL, and within the NFL, 5 or 6 different divisions. I worked with the Big East Basketball Conference, which is college basketball.
Right.
I work with a number of combat sports properties, a lot of MMA, some jiu-jitsu, some kickboxing, regular boxing, professional wrestling. So
Nice.
I sort of carved out this niche as kind of the fight sports guy on the agency side, which was kind of
Right.
different, you know. And that's one lesson for the audience. You just don't know where the journey will take you.
Right.
But you know, when you're within the sports world, it's nice because it is such a small knit industry that it's really 1 degree of separation. So you find yourself meeting people that you never thought you'd meet, and then they're doing things that you really had no idea about, but it turns out that there's commonality because of all the things that you've learned along the way. So I found myself doing that for a number of years, and that was really rewarding, running my own business.
For sure.
And then about 5 years ago, because of all the fight sports work I had done, I was approached by the Gracie family, who obviously is very famous worldwide. But as you know, they're the first family of jiu-jitsu and rich history going back 100 years in Brazil.
Right.
The family, along with another gentleman in New York, the 3 of us started a professional grappling circuit called Kasai. And Kasai was a live events company that put on jiu-jitsu matches. And it had never been done at this scale. So we were we created a sports property from scratch. And that meant, you know, social media, that meant live events, that meant, you know, basically producing a league. Right. So having the ability to build something from the ground up was very exciting. And I was the chief operating officer. So I ran the business end. Hollis Gracie ran the fight side of things. And we have another gentleman, Rich Byrne, out of New York, who basically helped us with financing and also was managing the business day to day as well. He was our CEO. So did that for about 4 years and loved it. And then the pandemic hit. And so, you know, once that happened, there were no more live events.
Right.
We couldn't book 2,000 seat arenas anymore because nobody was going to live events during this time. So that gave me a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do next. And that brings us to what I'm doing now with the Carnegie Initiative.
That's awesome. I mean, like, I have to just touch upon like 2 things though, because one of them is obviously, you know, your experience with the WWE, which I think is like, you know, in a sense, just entertainment, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, I'm not, you know, of course, like, you know, it's all fighting, but I guess like in a different level from the whole jiu-jitsu and the MMA. But I guess like just being in that, you know, WWE bubble, which I mean, like, they try to get a lot of fans. What kind of, I guess, like, key takeaway did you I guess, like, see from being part of that?
It was an amazing experience. I was there for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And I learned more in those 2 years about how to market a sports property than I think I did my entire career.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, there are a couple reasons. One is Vince McMahon, who runs the company, who most in the industry know who Vince is, but he is kind of a marketing mad genius of sorts.
Right.
And to sit by his side and watch the way he would push this product. I mean, you're talking about a sports property that does live television 51 weeks out of the year. They take Christmas week off.
Right.
So they're putting on 2 and 3 shows a week, depending if there's a pay-per-view or not.
Yeah.
They're basically producing live television all year round, 24/7. It never stops.
That's crazy.
It's unbelievable. So I came from a background with the NHL where there's a season, And
Right.
leading up to the season, you do a lot of work and you push hard on the properties and the marketing. And then during the season, you manage things. And then
Mm.
in between the seasons, you're working constantly, but it's different levels, right?
Right.
There's spikes. With
Yeah.
WWE, it's as the kids like to say, it's all gas, no brakes. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like
Right.
just constant. So to be able to survive for 2 years just doing that took a lot of discipline and a lot of learning, and I learned so much in that short amount of time. So that was my WWE experience.
Oh, I mean, like I think it's a lot of lessons to learn from it, even during the pandemic, right? Like how they even like maintain a lot of their audience. Just like I saw, like, all the screens. They essentially made like a stadium of screens, which was very fascinating. It's like, all
Big
right, well,
time.
that's a great way to do it.
They're so innovative, and I
Yeah.
mean, you think about them too. They have this just rabid fan base, right? And
Right.
they're not afraid to take risks. For
Mm.
example, they started that WWE network, which was initially
Right.
about 7, 8 years ago,
Yep.
and over the top channel, direct consumer. So for the audience, they had this lucrative pay-per-view business where they would work with cable and satellite distributors all around the world, and they still do this, of course.
Mhm.
But that was their main source of revenue, is making sure that the cable operators and the satellite providers showed their pay-per-views, and people would pay their money, and they'd split it up between the operator and
Right.
themselves.
Yeah.
They decided to go direct to consumer
I know.
7, 8 years ago before anybody. And now everybody's doing it.
Right.
You look at NBC with Peacock, you look at Viacom with Paramount Plus, you look at
Right.
ESPN Plus. They did this WWE network 5 years ahead of everybody, risked their biggest revenue source to do it, and came out on top. I mean,
Right.
that tells you everything you need to know about Vince and WWE and just the kind of innovative company that they are.
And I think that, like, that's why, like, I don't want to make this like a full WWE podcast, but it's just like, my point of, like, people don't know this side of it, like people
No,
just see, like,
no.
oh, it's just like, it's fan driven, like it's of course, like, extremely professional, and they do, like, massive live events, and demands a lot of, content and planning, right? Which is
Right.
fascinating in itself. But it's just like, if you start digging and you're like looking at, how they've been operating, like how innovative they are, and you've been
It's
sitting right at
amazing.
the table. And that's why, like, we had to, like, just get that out, for those that
Yeah.
are, like, just because I think also people don't think that, like, that WWE would be an option, either to work in a sense,
Right.
sports. But I mean, like,
Right.
how can they not be? And
Yeah. I kind of had the same reservation, to be honest, because I was
right,
coming from a professional sports league in the NHL.
yeah,
And I always joke with people that I went from real fighting with hockey to scripted fighting with wrestling.
right,
But to your point, I mean, they are a sports and entertainment behemoth. They are just a massive property. And now you see they're getting mainstream media coverage. Their social media, I think if you add up all the talent
yeah,
and their following, I mean, it's second to none. I mean,
right,
there's hundreds of millions of followers.
yeah.
So they have a formula that has worked for them for a
Mm.
long time, but they've evolved, and I think the key is that they've taken some risks, some calculated risks.
Yeah, that side, it's like a perfect moment to, like, move over to the, Carnegie Initiative, and obviously you're the
Yeah,
CEO there, and I guess, like, just talking a little about, what is the Carnegie Initiative all about, and I guess, like, what is the key purpose behind
yeah, yeah. So hockey has been in my blood for my whole life. I played it as a kid, ice hockey. For those out there, I played it as a kid. I was a big fan. I was fortunate. I got to work at the NHL for 7 years, as I mentioned, and it's a sport I care very much about. And one of the things that has bothered me, and when I was at the league, I should back up for a second.
Sure.
When I was at the league, I met a gentleman named Bryant McBride, who is an amazing guy. He was the first African American executive hired by the league. He ran the initial diversity efforts at the league, hired a gentleman by the name of Willie O'Ree, who was the first Black player in NHL history to come back and be an ambassador for the game. And I was there when that started, and I was involved with some of the early planning for the diversity initiatives the league has had and so forth. Well, like many businesses, I think the sport, I won't even say business, but I think the sport of hockey, not just the NHL, has been slow to adapt to the changing world. And one of the things about hockey, which is very challenging, is it's an expensive sport to play.
Right.
If you think about it, a lot of equipment, you've got to have ice time, you've got to find a rink. I mean, unlike something like basketball, where you really just need a ball and a hoop somewhere, you can play it in your driveway, right? Yeah. So hockey it's challenging. And one of the side effects of that expense is that sometimes it shuts out certain socioeconomic groups because it's so expensive. And so in North America anyway, it has been sort of a very traditionally wealthy and frankly white sport for a number of years. When I was at the league, there were, maybe 10 players of color in the league. Now there's 30 or 40. And so our idea is, can we accelerate that growth over the next 10 years and see more inclusiveness, more diversity within the sport? And that starts at the grassroots level and that goes all the way up to the NHL. So the Carnegie Initiative was started by Bryant McBride, who I mentioned, and a woman named Bernice Carnegie. Bernice, her father, Herb Carnegie, was a Black player from Canada in the 1940s and 1950s. Wow. He was one of the 5 best players in the world. Nice. And he couldn't break into the NHL at that time because it was segregated. It was a white sport only. Yeah. And he basically was told by a league executive that I would pay anybody $10,000 to paint you white. And that hurt him till the day he died. He was so upset about that because basically they're telling him, you're good enough to be here, but because of the color of your skin, we can't hire you. So this was in the mid 1950s. And instead of just, living with that and just putting his skates away, he decided to do something about it. He formed the first hockey school for minority children in Toronto in 1956, I believe. That's amazing. And so from that point on until his passing in the mid 2000s, he had this school in the Toronto area, and it produced NHL players. Anson Carter, who is Black, is playing in the league. There are a number of players that came through his Future Aces program, that was the name of his program, throughout the decades. So he decided he was going to do the work. That was his mission, to do the work. I'm going to do something about, I don't want to see what happened to me happen to anybody else. 100%. That was his motivation. But the Future Aces was a lot more than that. It was about educating children. It was about assimilating marginalized groups. It was about making hockey a welcoming space. And so fast forward to 2018, and Willie O'Ree, the gentleman I mentioned, who was the first Black player, was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And largely that happened because of the work that Bryant did with him. He had a very brief NHL career. He only played 20 games or so, but then he played another 2 decades in the minor leagues. Yeah. But he was in the Hall of Fame and is in the Hall of Fame because of his social justice work and his community work and the work that he did with diversity and growing the game. And so our idea with the Carnegie Initiative was to name it after Herb Carnegie.
Right.
Bryant and Bernice are the co-chairs.
Mm-hmm.
We have a board of directors from people involved at the NHL level all the way down to the community and grassroots level. We have hockey moms on our board that you've never heard of. But when I talk about making the game more diverse, the sport more diverse, I'm obviously talking about people of color, but I'm also talking about any marginalized group you can think of,
right.
LGBTQ plus, indigenous people, para-abled, so the disabled. There's sled hockey. Also women. I mean, there needs to be more women within the sport. The sport is growing on the female side, but there are not enough women in management at the NHL level, at the minor league levels. So a big part of our initiative is growing awareness of work that's being done to further this. And so we're doing three things. One is that we are raising money for grants. We're working with different universities in North America, from Harvard to University of Michigan to several Canadian universities. We're going to issue grants to these universities for them to study some of the issues plaguing the sport. We want the data. Nobody has ever done any kind of real in-depth, detailed research on, has anybody talked to 800 families of color about their experience in the rink? No, nobody's ever done that. We want to do that. We want data. We want people to talk to us. So we're going to be raising money for these grants. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to do storytelling. We're going to produce a lot of content, and it's going to be positive and uplifting. It's going to showcase a lot of the stories and people that you've never heard of, but they've used the sport of hockey to assimilate and to overcome great obstacles. Mm-hmm. If you look at Willie O'Ree's story, and there's a film called Willie, this documentary that Bryant produced, that's been out there about Willie's life. Nice. He overcame so many things, and there are so many lessons from this. And so what we want to do is we want to showcase other people's stories. There's a family from Syria that left war-torn Syria and emigrated to Canada 3 or 4 years ago, didn't know the language, couldn't speak English. Somebody got them out and put a pair of skates on the kids, and because of hockey, they've now assimilated into the society up in Canada, and they've used that. There are Indigenous people in Canada that they have a tournament every year that nobody knows about called the Little NHL. Nice. So we're going to tell that story. We're going to tell the story of Angela James, who's the first female elected into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Mm. People don't know that story. So we're going to tell all these stories. The LGBTQ experience. We have on our board an openly gay referee who loves the sport but hates the locker room. So we're going to talk about that. We want to really shine a light on these stories. And then the third thing we're doing, which is very exciting, and it's coming up in January of 22, is something called the Carnegie Initiative Summit, the CI Summit. What we're doing there is we're inviting 250 thought leaders from the sport of hockey, from the media world, within the sport, frankly, just moms and connected families to talk to what's going on in the sport, showcasing the games as well, so everybody can watch it that can't attend. But we're bringing 250 people to Boston to talk about what's going on in the sport. Right. How do we change the culture of the sport? How do we make it more diverse and equitable and grow? Because at the end of the day, the sport will die unless it gets more diverse. And that's true of any sport, of course, right? Because the world is becoming more diverse, and it's becoming, less homogenous, as we say. So anyway, so the mission is threefold. It's really to do these things, to award grants, to produce content, to talk about these issues, and do it in a way that's transparent and accountable and has real data behind it.
Yeah, that's going to be extremely key as well. And I think like just the mixture of just not only sharing these stories in a sense, which obviously is data in itself. It's sort of like backing all these initiatives with new research and showcasing like, okay, what is actually, it's not just words coming up or like, just stuff we I wouldn't say made up, but it's kind of like, just in an essence where, you just back everything that you're saying, you're showcasing, okay, like, yeah, there's a lot of, hallway talk, locker room talk, all this stuff, right?
Right.
But here's the actual facts, and this is why we do what we do. And this is extremely important, to like help create that credibility and for those, doubters and naysayers out there to kind of like realize, well, it's actually been, something that has to be done and been, working a lot of things to achieve the results that is seen today, but it still need a lot more, to make the progress that needs to be done in the industry.
100%. And also, I think just from a standpoint of credibility and really exposure, okay, there are racial incidents that are going on the ice every day, right, that nobody knows about, and you would think this happened in, I just talked about Herb's story about 1955 and, somebody telling him, I'd pay anybody to paint you white. The name calling and the actions, it's still happening.
Right.
You saw what happened in the Ukraine a few weeks ago with that big incident, which was, abhorrent. These are happening all over the world, these incidents. And, part of it is the climate of of society. Part of it is, social media has kind of made people, unfortunately, more brazen when it comes to, some of this hate speech and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And all it does is it ruins a pure experience for children that want to play this sport and want to feel welcome.
Right.
And, the worst thing we can do is ignore that, in my mind. The status quo is the enemy, is what we like to say. So we really, and the last point I want to make on this too, is that we're speaking with a lot of different companies. And listen, and as you know, a year and a half ago when George Floyd was murdered here in the United States, it really was a tipping point for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And corporations in particular pledged a lot of money to doing better in the areas of diversity, equality, equity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And so, this is a way for us to be able to say to them, okay, we're actually doing the work here. We're not putting a black square on our Instagram feed for 24 hours just so we can check a box and we can say that we care. This is really doing the work.
Right.
And so, the efforts with the Carnegie Initiative is about doing the work. It's about sharing it with like-minded people who are also doing the work, because there are a lot of people doing the work in silos.
Right.
So the summit will bring everybody together. The storytelling will bring people together.
Yeah.
The data that we're going to do through these grants, we're going to publish, quarterly papers. We're going to hopefully do some podcasts on a regular basis and talk about these issues.
Right.
Because we want to be transparent. We want to be accountable. We want to show people that these things matter and our actions matter. And that's the only way we're going to change the culture of the sport.
Right. No, 100%. And I'm looking forward to seeing all this great content inside the Sporting Global platform, so all the young future leaders of the industry, can take this into themselves as well and understanding, okay, this is something that is, happening that we can, get involved in and also learning, right? I mean, I think that's one of the key aspects of just creating that awareness and understanding for the new generation to understand, okay, what is happening. And for those that are, more like as our audience, a lot of young, students, sport professionals are trying to find their career of like realizing where is the industry moving, what kind of, areas can I, get involved in, and what is important for me, as to find their path. And we're going to talk a little bit about it, of course, that at the end as well. But I wanted to kind of like just, I guess in a sense, just have you like a little bit mapping out quite briefly, like a little bit on your, I guess, like key priorities and tasks that you're having as the CCO right now, just so people get
Sure.
like, what is it actually exactly in the title,
Yeah. Well, that's the fortunate thing when you start an initiative like this, you get to make up your own title. So that's good. I decided I wanted to be chief commercial officer, and then figure out what that means after I name myself. So no, but no. In reality, this was very exciting. I was, as I mentioned, Bryant and Bernice. This was their idea.
Yeah.
They brought in myself and a woman named Stephanie Gaosis, who is the executive director,
right?
And I'm the chief commercial officer. So really, day to day, the four of us are really working on this, and we've got some young folks, some interns, some paid interns, as well as some coordinators as well.
Yeah.
But from my standpoint as chief commercial officer, my number one priority is fundraising. We are a not-for-profit. That's the other thing I should mention, is this initiative is not for profit. It's not for profit. So that means that we're going to be putting all the proceeds into this initiative. So my big part of my job is fundraising, and that has come from a number of sources. Corporations. We've been very fortunate that we've been working with a number of big folks. I'm going to not announce who we're working with just yet, because we're going to have a big announcement in a couple of weeks with a number of sponsors and donors. But just to give you a sense, big Fortune 500 companies, also small emerging groups that really want to make a difference in the community.
Right.
We're also working with a lot of the governing bodies of the sport, including the NHL.
Yeah.
We're not partners with the NHL. We're very clear that we're arm's length, because we have to be honest about what's happening within the sport.
Yeah.
And the NHL they understand that.
Right.
They support us, and they're interested in supporting some of the grant money, possibly. Yeah. So we're talking to them about that. So we're looking at working with a lot of the governing bodies. We're also working with just individuals. We have a lot of what we call friends of the CI that are just connected hockey families that want to donate.
Right.
And they believe in the mission of what we're doing, and they want the sport to change for the better. They want to change the culture.
Yeah.
So anyway, wrapping that up, fundraising is a big part of it. Also on the things I mentioned, we're in the process of working on a media deal right now with 2 or 3 different partners in North America to help us produce and distribute and promote the content that I mentioned to you earlier. So 2022, we plan on starting that. We're going to have some announcements. We have a tentative deal in place with one partner already, which I won't mention, but it's a significant media partner here in North America. And it's going to allow us greater reach to be able to get this content out and make people aware. So working on that as well. And then just day to day working with the people on our board and anybody really that wants to help in some way. Currently, of course, it's right now my focus is producing the summit, which is less than two months away. So
imagine.
Hectic. Yeah, very hectic, but good. But I mean, it's going to be great. And the thing about the summit is it's kind of our coming out party. We announced the initiative in June, which we kind of called like a soft launch. We put a press release out. We've been having conversation. That was basically enough for us to be credible to talk to companies about what we're doing.
Yeah.
January is going to be our real coming out party. People are going to see it. The conference, the summit will be live streamed, so anybody can watch it. There's going to be a lot of media and press coverage there. So we're also going to be, I think, really getting a lot of exposure coming out of this conference. So currently, that's a big part of what I'm doing.
That's, I mean, like, it's kind of like the thing when you're working on a new project, you will always have, multiple hats, and a lot of
yeah, oh yeah,
that you have to do. But it's good to sort of like, map everything out a little bit, so people are like, maybe that's an option or an opportunity I want to do like down the road. And I'm just thinking as well, because time is flying fast when we're having a great conversation. And I just wanted to like touch a little bit upon, one, a little bit of like, I guess, how this initiative essentially is changing, I guess, in a sense, the trend itself in the hockey industry. And obviously, one of the main factor, of the Carnegie Initiative is to change the culture of hockey, right? Which, so like, the stuff that you were talking about. But if you're looking for, to provide some tips for any students out there that are, actively trying to find an organization that fits, their beliefs and sort of like where they can provide value, like what kind of tips would you give them? And I guess like, as well, maybe in this trend of hockey changing, like where should people start if they're sort of like passionate about hockey as well?
Yeah, well, I think as you know, Ole, sports is all about passion, right? I think if your main objective is making a lot of money and living comfortably, there are probably other industries that might fit that requirement more than sports.
Right.
So you have to have a passion for it. And as a young person, I did, and it was something that I really focused on my college summers, interning, doing a lot of internships, making sure that I was building my own personal network. I mentor a lot of students, and one of the things that I always tell them is, if you really want to be a part of an organization, before you walk in the door, you better know a lot about that organization. Do your homework.
Right.
Don't just be a fan. Anybody can be a fan, but understand the business side of it as best you can. Obviously, you've never worked in an organization if you're a student,
right.
Or at least most have not.
Yeah.
So, but if you're passionate about hockey and you're passionate about working for a team or a league or an organization that is within the sport, learn what they do. Learn not just the hockey side of it, learn the business, learn the marketing side, understand what they're trying to do with social media, fan engagement. As you know, building a fan base never stops.
Right.
Fan engagement is so important. There are new fans every day that they're trying to attract. And you have a unique perspective as a young person. You understand, you're still young enough that you understand what appeals to you will appeal to new fans as well, because
right.
you're of that demographic. So bring that to any conversation with these folks, and just work hard. I like to always say that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really true.
Yeah.
Be the person that gets noticed, because the one thing about sports is that you will be working long hours. If you work for a team, you're going to be at every game. You're going to be working at nights. You're going to be working, at all hours, the weekends quite a bit. So you have to have that mindset. You also have to know that you're starting at the bottom, and you have to work hard to move up. And but the one thing that I want to emphasize too is that sports is small enough still that once you get in the door and you build your network, that's a network you have for life. I still call on people that I met 25 years ago, and I'm fortunate that they take my calls, because I guess I did something right.
Right.
But the point is that it's an industry where relationships really matter. So, you know, being an intern, being a young coordinator or a young marketing associate, absorb everything, listen more than speak, go there, you know, immerse yourself in the sport, in the company, in the organization, learn, treat that like graduate school, like I did when I worked at the NHL. That's your graduate school.
Right. No, but it's you know, extremely important point I think you bring up, because, you know, a lot of people have, you know, an expectation for, oh, I'm working for, like, even if you're, you know, like, oh, I'm going to work for, like, you know, say like San Jose Sharks, you know, or like some sort of, you know, top NHL team, right? And you're just thinking like, oh, if I don't get a job for the NHL team, like I'm not going to make it, you know, like you can work for minor league teams, like the grassroots hockey. There's so many initiatives as well where you can do and provide that value. But at the same time, like that network is sort of like still so close that if you provide value and you put down the work, people will notice. And
absolutely,
I try to tell that a lot too. Like, you know, just when I was in the US, obviously, you know, I'm from Norway, and then coming to a new country, it's not just, you know, it's just not easy. You're just starting from scratch. But I knew like I had to start from scratch. You know, I had to, you know, so the first thing I did was volunteering. And then I did for free internships. Then I did paid internships. And then I built my way up. And I knew like, well, I know what I'm talking about. I'm going on one of the best programs. So I know I'll learn. And now I just need to understand how this industry works in the US compared to what I'm used to in Norway, right? So once you have that and you provide the value, it will pay off. But you need to put down that work. And I think a lot of young people now they kind of, you know, and I'm still, I guess, in a sense, fairly young, you know, within essence, but it's sort of like a thing where you kind of like expect that you're going to get like a job at Real Madrid or like San Jose Sharks, or whatever, like, you know, top organization right off school, you know, like you're going to make decisions. And that's not entirely true.
and if your goal is to work for Real Madrid, okay, have a plan. You know, you're not going, you're coming out of school. You're not going to, most likely you're not going to start at Real Madrid. But if you really love football and you want to be at the biggest football club in the world, then do what you can to work at the grassroots level, understand media, understand their business, bring something. Maybe it's sponsorship, maybe it's, you know, the ability to grow a fan base through a unique program you start. You know, you can volunteer with school programs and use that as experience for your next job and your next job and your next job. And as you go, all of a sudden you're innovating and being somebody that has a unique experience. Like I like to tell people, I have a very unique story. Everybody should have a unique story, right? My story is I'm one of the few people that can say that they've worked for a league, for a team, for a sports property, for an agency, somebody that's run their own business within the world of sports. So I feel like I have a unique background, a unique story to tell to any organization I work with and for. So I think that's the lesson too, is that you have to develop your own story. You're not going to start at the top. You're going to start at the bottom, but develop your own story with a goal in mind of that's where I want to be. I want to be at Real Madrid.
No, I mean, like that's 100% as well, because there's nothing wrong having those goals, but just understanding, you know, the journey and the steps that it has to take and make that game plan to achieve it. You know, whether that's, you know, going to school, whether that's, you know, getting experience, or where that journey falls along in that process is part of the journey.
Being the first one in every day, being the last one to go home, not, you know, calling in sick, you know, just making sure that you're there, you're present. Because half the time when you start to work at these sports organizations, it is all hands on deck. It is, you know what, somebody's out today. We need somebody to work the scoreboard, or we need somebody to pass out the press notes in the press box for the media people, right? And then all of a sudden you find yourself, you're in a position where, oh, well, I didn't expect to be here, but you are present. Being present is so important. You're going to find yourself in these great advantageous spots within the sports world before you know it. So,
and it's a really good point too, because these things comes up all the time. Like whatever sports or events or whatever you're working for, like there will be a situation where it's like, oh, we need help with this, or like something just came up, we need to fix this. And then if you are, going out there and like bringing that passion and going for it, and maybe you don't know how to do it yet.
That's right.
Talk.
Always raise your hand.
Yeah.
Always raise your hand and say, I'm available.
Right.
Put me in, coach. I can do it. And even if you have to fake it till you make it, you do it. You just put yourself in that position.
You learn.
That's how you learn.
You talk with people, and you will have. It's not like they're gonna leave you alone and say like, "Hey, figure it out." You will have people around you to guide you, and then you learn so much by doing it.
The biggest thing for me is, as a young student coming out of school, is obviously experience is key, right? And students say to you all the time, I'm sure, how do I get experience?
Right.
Sometimes you have to create your own experience.
Right.
Quite honestly, you have to do something. Organize okay, you want to work at Real Madrid, and you're coming out of school and you don't have any prospects to work for even a minor, football club.
Yeah.
Well, organize your own tournament and do something. And then even if it's at the grassroots level, that's a form of experience that you can say to now when you're applying for that next level football club that didn't really want you a year ago, you can say to them, hey, look what I've been doing. I've been doing this at the grassroots level. I've been volunteering my time here. I've been developing my own fan base for this, or my own social media following for that. I mean, that is experience. So sometimes you can take it into your own hands and get it done.
Absolutely. Well, with that, Ken, it's a perfect way to wrap up. It was a lot of fun just, digging into your mind and journey. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So we might have to do a follow-up episode at some point, when
that'd be great.
After the summit or something like that, just kind of see how that went, and all exciting things for the new year, of course, for you, Ken, and everything that is going on. But I would like to thank you so much, for taking the time for joining us and for sharing your story. And then as always as well, I think most people are starting to be aware now that we have like this tradition that we're doing on every podcast. So with every video we do, we always finish with "Vi snakkes," which means see you later in Norwegian. So that's what you got to say.
Wow. Repeat that for me one more time.
Vi snakkes.
Vi snakkes.
Snakkes.
I hope I was close. Snakkes.
There you go. Vi snakkes.
Vi snakkes.
Perfect. Easy. Everyone can speak Norwegian.
All right. Well, when I come to Oslo, you'll have to remind me of that. But hey, this was a pleasure, Ole. Thank you so much, and be happy to come back anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ken. We'll talk soon. All right.
All right. Be well.